So you've got to see this stuff. There's a growing trend, which we expected, for reporters to ask Joe Biden's White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, tough questions during press briefings that aren't actually tough questions. They're just sort of fake drama and attack lines. And I'm the first person to tell you that every press secretary, regardless of party, should get tough questions, real tough questions, questions like, Joe Biden promised $2,000 checks right away, and we're 3 weeks in and talking about $1,400. Explain. That's a real question of urgent importance to the American people. But what I'm going to play for you today, and what we've seen in the press briefing room for 2.5 weeks now under Joe Biden's presidency, these aren't real tough questions. These are ridiculous questions. So let's check out some of these examples. Here is a reporter asking, why won't Joe Biden call Antifa terrorists? What are the definitions of terrorists? And why is the focus only on January 6th?
That there was, Jake Sullivan mentioned the focus on domestic terrorism yesterday from this administration. I think a lot of people want to know, how does this administration define the term domestic terrorist?
In what way?
Well, does that include Antifa specifically? How do you set those parameters for domestic terrorists, especially as we see, a lot of focus on the January 6th, maybe not as much focus on some of the extremism and violence in the Northwest?
Well, I've answered a version of this question a couple times before, but I know everybody's not in the briefing room every day. The reason we have the review, which is not a political review, but is a review done by our national security team, something tasked, again, to take a review of domestic violent extremism, will cover incidents across the board.
You sort of get the sense that Jen Psaki deals with this the way a parent deals with an obstinate kid throwing a tantrum, sort of like some amused detachment, but still having to remain strict in order to control the situation and not encourage bad behavior. And then a question that sort of tries to paint teachers as these stubborn adversaries refusing to go back to school. And Jen Psaki does a good job of not letting the framing be that teachers are bad and the enemy and are going to have to be forced back.
Those questions, but go ahead.
Will President Biden use the power of the bully pulpit to help cajole teachers who are unwilling to go back to schools to go back?
Well, one, I'm just going to reject the premise of the question. I will say I have teachers in my family, as I'm sure many of you do. They are the first people to tell you that teaching in the classroom and being able to engage with kids in the classroom, or middle schoolers or high schoolers in the classroom, it makes their job more enjoyable, makes them more effective at what they do.
So she turns the question around, and it doesn't matter. The reporter keeps going and then tries to inaccurately summarize what Jen Psaki actually said.
That sounded like a yes with an asterisk.
If you are the spokesperson for the White House, you could certainly say that, but you are not. But you can ask me another question.
My second quick question is last year.
These briefings there's an attempt to turn these briefings into a joke, but for very different reasons than they were a joke under Trump's White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany. Another game that they're playing is saying, Biden said unity. Biden promised bipartisanship, but no Republicans are supporting the COVID bill. So is this evidence that Joe Biden is abandoning bipartisanship and unity? And Jen Psaki is receiving this question all the time, and she's doing a good job answering.
And given the president's remarks earlier and his change of tone, it does seem that he is now okay if this does happen just with Democratic support, despite those hopes and despite his calls for unity.
Well, first of all, the president ran on unifying the country and putting forward ideas that would help address the crises we're facing. He didn't run on a promise to unite the Democratic and Republican Party into one party in Washington. This package has the vast majority of support from the American public.
I'm fine with the question, and she should keep answering it this way, but it needs to be said really clearly. Joe Biden made a proposal and then met with Republicans to hear their side, to get their thoughts, to get a sense of what they want. Republicans proposed something absurd. They proposed a package less than 1/3 the size of what Democrats and Joe Biden want. And what Joe Biden and Democrats want is popular with the American people. Joe Biden has a 69% approval rating on COVID, 63% approval overall. You don't get that with just Democrats. Trump never even got to 50% approval on one day of his presidency. And Joe Biden's already at 63 overall, 69 on COVID. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Joe Biden engaged with Republicans. The American people want something else. Democrats want something else. And Joe Biden wants something else. And it's Joe Biden's responsibility to get it done. At some point, you can't keep waiting around for bad faith actors. So I guess this is sort of how it's going to be. I would prefer, rather than silly non-gotchas, that they actually put together some serious, well-calibrated, tough questions. That's what I would like to see. It's not clear that that's actually going to happen. And as we saw very early on in Joe Biden's presidency, it's not clear that, as she points out, unity and bipartisanship don't mean you have to give up everything to get a Republican to vote with you. When you have the country more behind you and more behind these ideas than they ever were behind anything Donald Trump did, at some point you have to just say, listen, I offered everything. We offered the meetings. What they want is ridiculous. We're not going to do it. It's not what the American people want. At a certain point, you have to do that. It's your responsibility. And I hope that that's actually what Joe Biden is doing now. One of our sponsors is Four Sigmatic, the company best known for their delicious mushroom coffee. Four Sigmatic's mushroom coffee is organic, fair trade, single origin Arabica coffee with both lion's mane and chaga mushrooms. Chaga mushrooms have actually been shown to have potential in supporting the immune system in peer-reviewed studies. I've been drinking Four Sigmatic coffee a lot lately. It actually doesn't taste anything like mushrooms. It just tastes like any delicious coffee, but it's really easy on my stomach, doesn't give me any jittery feeling or a midday crash. And they have over 20,000 five-star reviews. And best of all, if you don't love it, you'll get 100% of your money back because they stand behind their product. You've got nothing to lose by giving it a try. Four Sigmatic is giving my audience up to 40% off and free shipping when you go to foursigmatic.com/Pakman. The link is right underneath this video.